All right. God, I'm glad it's a different audience from last time I was here, because I'm going to do the same thing again. No, I'm joking. No, you know the French philosopher Henri Bergson? He wrote his book on humour. He said repetition is the basis of all humour, so the more you hear me do the same thing, the funnier it becomes. That's my excuse anyway. I was going to say it was like a sauna in here, except I went to Finland last week and had a real one. It's not like a sauna, it's more like sitting on the London Tube. What I'm going to do is bits from various books, and you can buy the books out the front as you go out if you want. And please do, because I could do with the money. This is from a novel called Red London, which was my last novel that came out last year. It's about Buddhists, because I had the misfortune to share a house with some Buddhists, and I got their number. They said I was spiritually aborted. I thought they were wankers, and I worked out what they got up to with their swami. The guru grunted and groaned. He could feel the excrement in his guts, but had yet to succeed in expelling the huge lump of shit. He tensed his muscles and applied all the energy he could muster against the recalcitrant turd. Stars appeared in front of the Swami's eyes. He felt dizzy and had to sit down. The guru hadn't had a shit in 3 days, and he guessed that the accumulated waste that festered in his stomach must weigh in a good 4 or 5 pounds. Father David got up again and proceeded to waddle about like a demented sumo wrestler. Once he was ready for action, the Swami positioned his arse over Tom Daly's face. This time, the grunting, groaning and spasmodic contraction of muscles brought about the result Father David desired. It felt as if someone had shoved their hand up the guru's arse and then proceeded to wrench out his guts. The turd was a whopper, and Tom swooned into semi-consciousness as it smashed against his forehead. Father David squatted down beside the boy and inspected the gut-buster. It was dark, streaked with blood, and larger than any turd the Swami had seen during the course of a lifetime dedicated to all things scatological. The guru picked up the love offering. It felt very solid in his hand. Buddha be praised, Father David howled as he raised the turd above his head. Hail victory, the assembled monks chanted in unison. Neither Christ nor Satan, the Swami cried, but a Buddha who unites the Teutonic race with a single set of spiritual values, the assembled monks responded. Father David was well pleased with himself and allowed the huge turd to be passed from hand to hand so that his followers could touch, lick and sniff it. Then the excrement was measured and weighed so that details of this monster could be entered in a ceremonial diary that Father David had nicknamed the Brown Book. God, you shouldn't encourage me because it means that I'll do some of my poetry. One of the things I like about the idea of being Celtic, various people have got this idea that the Celts came from Africa. I know some people say we all came from Africa, but what Nation of Islam is a breakaway from is the Moorish Science Temple. And if you were Celtic, you were actually allowed to join the Moorish Science Temple because they considered you to be Persian at least, so African. Although I don't think the Nation of Islam would have me looking at the colour of my skin. The problem with this country is the ruling class. I mean, I blame it all on the Normans. Norman Tebbit, Norman Lamont, Barry Norman. And, you know, it's the Celts as representatives of multiculturalism who've got to save us. So this is a poem for everyone Celtic. And we're all Celtic now because, you know, it's to be miscegenated is to be Celtic. This is called All Power to the Druid Councils. The Druid Councils will one day become the essence of all humanity on earth, reproducing the power of brighter sunlight as it is perceived in a sheaf of flowers. They are the highest form of together being. They are the overthrowing of all alone being. In them each man, woman and gentle child can find the single aim of the ages, the spirit of humanity itself. The Druid Councils, then, are the brightest light. They mean peace, tranquility and balm for all. They are truth and the fountainhead of truth. They are the foundation rock in the great universe of humanity, the nerve centre of all labour. The Druid Councils mean joy for humanity. They are the light. Oh, good, you're not going to clap that one. You won't get any more poems. No, I mean, I do have an important query. I don't know what you think about this, but have you ever considered this question, right? And this relates to the poem in a certain way and what I said before. Is the Queen an alien? What do you think? Any opinions? Is the Queen an alien? She's an Odinist. I thought she was a Nordic Sufist myself, but anyway. No, the reason I ask is the Queen an alien, right, is, like I said, I was in Finland last week and I was looking at my passport before I went through the customs. Now they're in the EC, it's pretty easy anyway. And I was looking at my passport, and to be a British citizen means you're a subject of the Queen, right? But how can the Queen be a subject of herself? So maybe she's an alien. Maybe she doesn't have British status. She isn't a British citizen. You didn't think that was very funny. Okay, maybe I should repeat it and it would be funnier. This is from a collection of stories. You'll notice the first thing I did was from Red London. You can buy the book outside. This is from a collection of stories called No Pity, and guess what? You can buy the book outside. And it kind of reflects my distaste for British publishers, at least large ones, except now that I've signed to a bigger one, I don't dislike them so much. This is from a story called New Britain. A crowd had gathered in Queen's Square. They'd assembled to protest against the Booker Prize respectability of major publishing firm Crumb and Crud Limited. Numerous eyes gazed uneasily from the windows of Crud House, the company's London HQ. Since the KO Press, Hamish McCain's publishing operation, had begun organising demonstrations against the poor quality of British fiction, several buildings had gone up in flames. "Hamish, Hamish, I love you," a bird in her mid-twenties yelled as she threw her arms around the anarchist's neck. "I used to work as a secretary at Crumb and Crud, but I quit after I started reading your list. My name is Lisa O'Brien, and I want you to fuck me." McCain made the girl spread her arms against a wall of the Mary Ward Centre. He took a pair of handcuffs from his pocket and slipped them over Lisa's wrists, which were now held directly above her head. Then the young anarchist pulled down O'Brien's leggings so that her ass was exposed to the jeering crowd. He lifted an open palm up into the air, then brought it down against the girl's naked flesh. This was the signal his comrades had been waiting to receive before launching their assault on Crud House. Dozens of windows shattered as bricks and petrol bombs rained against the building. Within a matter of seconds, Crud House had disappeared beneath a sheet of flame. "Old farts out," the crowd chanted in unison. "We want books full of sex, violence and anarcho-sadism, not boring literary shit in which nothing happens." Lisa's arse was red from the series of blows Hamish directed against it. McCain dropped his stay pressed and then spun O'Brien around before forcing the bird onto her knees. Lisa took the anarchist's erect cock in her mouth. She was loving every minute of this sex session. Although Lisa had never met Hamish before, everything they were doing together had been arranged in advance through a mutual friend. Crumb and Crud employees who attempted to flee from their blazing office were subjected to savage beatings by the anarchists who'd occupied Queen's Square. Since the police had been privatised, they'd become remarkably slow at answering emergency calls, because injury sustained in violent situations could wreak havoc on the Met's profit rating. The anarchists did as they pleased, securing the knowledge that the cops wouldn't turn up until after they'd absconded from the scene of their present crimes. "I don't believe this is happening to me," a commissioning editor wailed as his cheek was sliced open with a Stanley knife. McCain had flung himself against O'Brien like a wolf descending on its prey. Lisa loved the way Hamish battered her twat with his love truncheon. The weight of the anarchist pressing down against her gave the girl a sense of security. In a situation such as this, she knew exactly where to find the boundaries that marked the limits of her being. "That feels so good," Lisa squealed. "Shut up, bitch," Hamish snarled. O'Brien loved the ritual trading of insults during sex, but decided to clam up because she wanted to offer her partner total submission. She recognised the muscle spasms that preceded McCain's orgasm. Split seconds later, her insides were flooded with the anarchist's genetic wealth. Simultaneously, endorphins were sweeping through Lisa's brain. She too had come. I mean, you all spotted, obviously, I'm completely opposed to serious culture and the notions of good taste that are used to regulate the cultural field. What I usually ask before the next piece is, are there any feminists here tonight? Any feminists? No feminists? Oh, I'm really upset, because I really like intelligent women, and all my girlfriends are feminists, but there's none here tonight. That's a shame. Anyway, this is for all the feminists who didn't come. This is from a story called Girl Power, which was kind of inspired by Riot Girl, which is kind of old, but, new wave, just didn't excite me enough to write a story about it. The kids were really grooving at the Crest, a rock and roll toilet located on the back streets behind the Camden Road train station. The Alf Garnett Experience, or Age as they're affectionately known among fans, had kicked off their set with a new song entitled Bitch on Heat. The audience was in 4/4 heaven. "When I look around me," the singer Phil Moronic announced, "I can see that everyone knows the chick's place is at the back of the hall. Dolly Bird should hold their geezer's coat while he rocks out at the front." This next number is a cover which was originally done by a bunch of 15-year-olds back in 1977. This song has a message, and I hope everybody listens to it. The message is the same today as when Eater first performed it all those years ago. Any bitches who think they can fuck blokes around, take note. This is called Get Raped. 1, 2, 3, 4. As the band sped through the opening bars, there was a disturbance at the door. The bouncers were overwhelmed, and a gang of girls dressed in leather jackets and DMs raced into the pub wielding baseball bats. The Amazons' assault went unopposed as they charged into the room. The sheer unexpectedness of the attack gave them a massive psychological advantage. The crowd parted as if it was the sea responding to a command from Moses. The women were like a whirlwind, scattering blokes in their wake. Robin Rolls reached the stage and whacked Phil Moronic over the head with a bat. The singer slumped to the floor, knocked for six by a single blow. The music ground to a halt as the sisters smashed guitars and amps. The drummer ran through a side exit, thereby escaping the righteous blows of the Valerie Solanas commando and their crew. But his kit was trashed in retaliation. "Death to boy rock," someone shouted through a microphone. "Go and get fucked," a sexist retard shot back as he ran for the exit. Robin Rolls was pleased with the night's work. Boy rock was a sonic abortion. Blokes simply didn't understand the subtleties of the hypnotic beat invented by women priests several decades before the first pyramid was built. Girl rock revolutionaries intuitively grasped the ways in which a 4/4 rhythm could be used as a means of mind control. The Valerie Solanas Commando implanted many a message in the collective brain of their audience, but they were very careful about how this was done. In stark contrast, reactionary boy rockers failed to master the forces with which they toyed, and as a consequence, inflicted a great deal of psychic damage on their fans. That was also in my collection of stories called No Pity. You must have realised that short stories don't sell as well as novels, so you have to work a bit harder on selling them, which is why I keep doing selections from the short stories and not the novels. We had a request earlier for Frenzy of the Flesh, and this again is a sort of distasteful critique of serious culture. When Queen had removed all his clothing, Thomas took a large jar of Vaseline and began to rub the petroleum jelly onto the Fresher's face, hands, genitals, feet, and then finally into his arse. Steve had a hard-on throughout the operation. After this, Thomas took a roll of gauze and bandaged the used face, hands and feet. As his teacher started work on the genitals, Steve's erection was really throbbing. The gauze was wrapped around his balls. Then with expert precision, Thomas wound the bandage around the teenager's straining love muscle. Steve could stand it no longer and shot off a wad of his genetic due. The liquid DNA hit the art teacher in the eye, dripped down the side of his face and into his mouth. Thomas was a professional and continued with his bandaging as if nothing had happened. At last the preparations were finished, the gauze secured with a safety pin. Thomas removed his own clothing and used an internal telephone system to summon a technical assistant. The technician was wearing a white coat. Steve couldn't see this because a bandage had been wrapped over his eyes. There was a gap in the gauze to allow for the use of his mouth, but otherwise his face and neck were completely covered by the bandage. A tab of white lightning was beginning to hit as Thomas manoeuvred Steve into a tub filled with rotting meat. The youth's mind was filled with a pure white light. It was as if he'd entered heaven. He felt weightless and filled with well-being. Thomas positioned Steve face up in the bath and then got in on top of him. He sat so that his shit chute was positioned over Steve's mouth. Queen began to lick at the arsehole. He didn't connect the taste in his mouth with the sweet smell of the sewers. His acid-armed consciousness had convinced him he was in heaven. Thomas took a Tibetan ceremonial knife and cut into Steve's flesh. The teenager experienced his skin being ripped apart as a sweet caress. As Queen's tongue lashed into Thomas's arsehole, the wayward art teacher began to masturbate. He shot off a wad of liquid genetics and rubbed the DNA into the wounds he'd sliced out of the teenager's body. The art teacher twisted around and shoved his love muscle into Steve's mouth. The Fresher sucked the throbbing member deep into his throat. Queen had retreated to a point beyond consciousness, although he'd been sexually repressed for every second of his waking life. Now that his erotic energies were released, he knew instinctively how to deal with the uncut meat that had been stuffed into his throat. Thomas was out on the mud flats. He experienced the smell of rotting meat wafting up from beneath him as a salty breeze blown across from a tropical sea. Steve pumped up the volume, and Thomas experienced orgasm as a DNA-encoded replay of the first star exploding. The art teacher flipped Queen around. The Fresher's arsehole was well greased, and he had no trouble penetrating the sphincter. Thomas picked up a lump of rotting meat and shoved it into Steve's mouth before biting into the student's shoulder. The technician was getting perfect shots on his camcorder. Thomas was an old hand at the bump and grind routine, but young boys tended to get him overexcited. The art teacher was the wrong side of 40, and to be making with someone still at the peak of physical perfection really turned him on. Thomas came far quicker than he'd planned. An ego-negating simultaneous orgasm drained the last ounce of energy from the performance art perverts. They had reached that peak from which man and man can never jointly return. That's the one that always gets me into trouble. When I did it in Glasgow, the barmaid had to be relieved for the night because she was so upset. And the same thing happened in Portland. You're fine, good. But I told you were sophisticated in Brighton. See, barmaid's fine here, no problems. William Burroughs dies and wakes up in hell. The devil says, "Hey Bill, you're a pretty famous guy, so I'm going to give you a choice of which room you stop in." The devil takes Burroughs into the first room, and it's filled with people ankle deep in shit. The devil takes Burroughs into the second room, and people are standing around knee deep in shit. The devil takes Burroughs into the third room, and people are waist deep in shit, but they're drinking coffee. So the devil takes Burroughs out of the third room and says, "Well, Bill, which room do you want?" And Burroughs says, "I'll take the room where the people are drinking coffee." The devil leads Burroughs back into the room and shouts out, "Coffee break over, everyone back on their heads." This is a complete short story called Cheap Night Out. Having spent much of my life rooting out the corrupting influence of art from within the sphere of popular culture, it has been heartening to witness the sudden rise of the tribute band. While Grail Marcus wants to treat punk rock as high art, his intellectual posturing looks ludicrous when contrasted with the antics of the Scottish Sex Pistols. The high-kitsch stance of tribute bands undermines every effort to insert the songs they cover into the discourse of serious culture. Likewise, for the best part of a decade, I've been sickened by the way in which industrial rock has been used to bridge the divide between pop and art. Recently, I became convinced that the best way of dealing with this baneful situation was to form an industrial tribute band called the Australian White House. No one in the group actually hails from down under, although we all admire the tough-minded Aussie attitude towards art. White House have long attempted to project themselves as the most extreme industrial band, although on the handful of occasions when I've met frontman William Bennett, he's always struck me as being extraordinarily polite. Having secured a gay bar in Chinatown for the debut of the band, I was prowling Dean Street prior to the gig when I ran into the utterly talentless writer and filmmaker Henry Kawipi. The bullshitter of suburbia, as Kawipi is known among his chums, was with his girlfriend Sharon McClott, a film editor at the notoriously crusty publishers Crumb and Crud Limited. Upon clocking me, Kawipi pressed himself against a wall and manoeuvred McClott so that she was standing between us. "I know you're a fascist, but please don't hit me. Here, take my wallet," the bullshitter of suburbia whined as I approached him. "Cheers," I said, taking the money. "Your short hair really frightens me. I hate Nazis," Kawipi wailed. "I'm not a fucking Nazi," I exclaimed, as I pushed McClott aside and grabbed the bozo by the throat. "Don't kill me," Kawipi pleaded. "I'm a friend of Solomon Thursday, the author who had a papal bull issued against him after the Catholic hierarchy realised his novel, The Lucifer Couplets, was a great work of art. Thursday is tight with Special Branch, and if you hurt me, then he'll send them after you. The Mounties always get their man." "The Mounties are Canadian, you fucking moron," I spat at Kawipi. "Are they really?" the idiot sobbed. "I didn't know that." "Wow," McClott exclaimed, "an intelligent prole. I've met your kind before. At Crumb and Crud we signed up a dosser called John Harry. His book did very well, but we had to drop him after he assaulted an editor. I think you're very interesting. Let's go for a drink." "OK, but I choose the venue," I shot back. "I'm Sharon McClott," the notoriously dim-witted editor informed me. "I'm Luther Blissett," I hissed. "I'm a film editor at Crumb and Crud," McClott gushed. "It's a very important job. I commission books about the cinema. Mind you, I won't have anything to do with filth or rubbish. I don't like directors like John Walnut, the pervert who made Punk Flamingos." "You mean John Waters," I corrected. "Oh," McClott sighed, "it doesn't matter. Anyway, I only appreciate great works of art. I've forgotten his name, but you'll know his work. He directed Close Encounters." As she waffled, I led the Crumb and Crud bimbo into the venue hosting the first public performance of the Australian White House. Kawipi trotted along behind us, convinced that his girlfriend was going to treat him to the spectacle of fucking another man while he watched. McClott ordered 2 pints of lager and a bowl of water for the bullshitter, which he drank on his hands and knees. Unfortunately, this hack was so desperate to impress me that he was unable to stick to his submissive role. "You see," Kawipi ranted, "I've just been editing the Fabergé Book of Pop, and someone suggested that I include a story by K.L. Callan. I made it plain that I'd do no such thing. Callan has short hair and doesn't like my friend Solomon Thursday, so it's obvious he's a fascist. Callan," I said as I punched the bullshitter on the nose, "is a well-known revolutionary. He's not a fascist. Did you know I went to school with Billy Idol?" Kawipi boasted lamely, taking heed of my hint to change the subject. The venue was beginning to fill, and it was easy to persuade McClott and the bullshitter to get on stage with me. I had 2 assistants with a turntable who spun Hungry for Pain, while through the PA I ordered my literary companions to get naked and crawl around my feet. I bellowed the odd obscenity into the microphone, but put a lot more effort into kicking McClott and her boyfriend, both of whom him greatly enjoyed the punishment. Right to kill, some arsehole shouted from the audience. We're the Australian White House, I explained. We don't do right to kill. We've no truck with liberal rubbish about rights. If we want to kill someone, we just do it. Besides, you must be familiar with Bordegger's left communist critique of democracy. Only liberal do-gooders have any time for wishy-washy platitudes about human rights. But I thought you were a tribute band, the imbecile mewed. I whacked the twat over the head with my mic stand and that shut him up. In fact, it knocked him unconscious. As my assistant spun, I'm coming up your ass, I ordered the bullshitter to give his girlfriend the rear entry treatment. I kicked the upper-class twits about a bit more and bellowed several dozen obscenities. Halfway through the song, a member of the audience leapt on stage and shot the two literary masochists at point-blank range. Then the rogue announced that he was the British son of Sam before proceeding to masturbate into McClot's mouth. As the song ground to a halt, the mass murder groupie ran from the club and into the street. He was a hard act to follow, and although My Cock's on Fire was next on the set list, I decided death penalty would be more appropriate, so we went with that. Saul Bellow goes to the doctors, and the doctor says, Saul, I've got some bad news for you. You have cancer and you have Alzheimer's. Bellow says to the doctor, that's terrible, doctor, I have cancer. Well, at least I don't have Alzheimer's. This is from my last novel called Slow Death. What do you think of the European Parliament? A militant asked as he stepped into Johnny's path. Not a lot, the boot boy replied. In that case, perhaps you'd like to buy a copy of Marx's Times, the tosser said as he held up the magazine. I'm very interested in what you've got to say, but I'm illiterate, Johnny lied. Do you think you could read some of it out loud to me? If you bought the magazine, you could get one of your friends to read it for you, the Marxist suggested, fearing he'd end up wasting his time on the skinhead when he could be flogging party literature to an educated passer-by. It's not my fault if I'm thick, Johnny exploded. My mum and dad always worked in factories, and I didn't get on with the teachers at school. In fact, I was hardly ever there. I grew up on a council estate. No one's ever taught me nothing. Go on, read me a bit of the magazine. I'm very interested in what you've got to say. I bet you've been to university and all that. You'd read it much better than my mates. None of them would know how to pronounce long words. Oh, all right, the militant granted. Then after turning over a few pages, he began. In its struggle to overthrow the capitalist system of commodities, of alien things, and replace these antagonistic relationships with a socialised totality, where the products of human labour are no longer turned against the proletariat in its estrangement from the surplus value it creates, the working class faces. Hold on a minute, Johnny interrupted. I thought you was going to tell me about why the European Parliament is shit. I'm not interested in all this working class stuff. It's got nothing to do with me. Look, the Marxist said impatiently, I was getting to the European Parliament in a minute. The article begins by explaining how the proletariat relates to European politics. That ought to make the whole piece more interesting to you. It's written from a perspective you share with the party because you're working class. If I'm working class, Johnny spat, why am I on the dole? Why ain't I got a job? But that's just semantics, the militant cried. Fuck you, Johnny screamed as he rammed his fist into the Marxist's mouth. There was a satisfying crunch of splintering bone, and the bastard staggered backwards, spitting out gouts of blood and the occasional piece of broken tooth. Johnny was about to move in for the kill when he spotted two cops running down the street. I'm so glad you're here, Johnny told a WPC. This creature attempted to headbutt me after I told him I wouldn't listen to the lies he was spouting about our wonderful police force. Although I didn't start the trouble, once I was attacked I had no choice but to defend myself. I'm so glad you've come, because it proves my point about there always being a Bobby around to sort things out whenever he or she is needed. Don't worry, son, the youthful WPC said, as a male colleague handcuffed the militant. We'll make sure this troublemaker is prosecuted. Now, before I send you on your way, I'll need to take your details and a statement. What do you get if you cross an anarchist with an Aberdeen Angus? More bullshit than usual. Anyway, this is from my new novel, which is out on Monday, which is called Come Before Christ and Murder Love, which is, you know, an everyday tale of eating, fucking and occultism. I told Vanessa Holt to meet me at Greenwich train station. She was reluctant, saying she'd a lunch date with some friends. I told her I didn't give a damn. Either she wanted to be initiated into the secrets of the black veil and the white light, or she didn't. Vanessa was waiting for me in the train station when I arrived at the ticket office. We walked along to the Terminus Cafe and I ordered 2 cups of tea. Do you know how to communicate with spirits? I asked Vanessa. No, Holt replied. Come on, I shot back before downing the remains of my cuppa and standing up. Let's go. I led Holt along to the South London Book Centre. I scanned the shelves and eventually found a suitable tome, a 19th century edition of Schopenhauer's On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason. I told Vanessa to read it aloud to me. The divine Plato and the marvellous Kant unite their mighty voices in recommending a rule, Holt whispered, that serves as a method of all philosophising, as well as of all other science. 2 laws they teach us, the law of homogeneity and the law of specification. Carry on, I instructed as Holt fell silent. What is this crap? Vanessa demanded. Do you know what Islam means? I snarled. No, Holt hissed. It means submission, I explained, and it was amongst the Muslims that Sufism arose. All religious and occult doctrines of any worth are simply degenerate forms of Sufism, and so if you wish to pierce the veil that separates this world from the next, you'll have to submit to me and carry on reading. The law of homogeneity directs us to collect things together into kind, Holt spat. As for the law of specification, it requires that we clearly distinguish one from another, the different genera collected together under a single comprehensive conception. OK, I barked as I took the tome from Holt's hands and placed it back amongst the philosophy books. Let's go. What was that all about? Vanessa demanded once we were out in the street. I was showing you how to communicate with spirits, I explained, as we wandered into Greenwich Park. Come on, Holt protested. Look, I said, like all those who seek the truth, you've yet to learn that what to the eyes of the profane appears very mysterious is actually very mundane. Schopenhauer and his translator are dead. In other words, you've just received a communication from spirits. Those who are not yet born are also spirits, and by writing a book, you could communicate with them. Vanessa didn't appear entirely convinced by my argument. I led her up One Tree Hill, and she looked gorgeous as her long brown hair was blown about in the wind. We sat down on one of the park benches put out for the public. I told Vanessa to stretch out and place her head on my lap. We're going to do some sex magic, I explained. I want you to turn over onto your stomach and give me a blowjob. I'm not doing that, Holt protested. Someone will probably come up here and catch us at it. Don't worry about it, I reassured her. If anyone comes up here, I will banish them. Vanessa giggled as she took my cock from my flies. She held the base of my tool in her hand and sucked the tip with her mouth. I gazed over what had once been Novia Majus and across to the city of London. I let my mind drift, let it empty. I wanted to dive down into the depths of my psyche and root out anything that had been placed there against my will. Therefore, I wasn't surprised when 3 muses appeared, just as they had for Estrella, the Virgin Queen, 400 years before. However, I think it doubtful that the muses who appeared before Gloriana were dressed in baseball caps and jeans. They'll see us, Holt screeched, while simultaneously raising her head. Don't worry about it, I said as I pushed her head back down against my groin. I will banish them. The 3 boys were sharing a joke about some girl they knew. They were so absorbed in their conversation that they hadn't noticed Ness was giving me a blowjob. I took a copy of Sir Thomas Browne's Religio Medici from my pocket and picked a passage at random. There is no salvation to those that believe not in Christ, I boomed, which makes me much apprehend the end of those honest worthies and philosophers which died before his incarnation. What a strange vision it will be to see their poetical fictions converted into verities and their imagined and fancied furies into real devils. The 3 boys had noticed me now. They looked at each other and turned on their heels and fled, convinced I was a dangerous lunatic. How strange will sound the history of Adam, I bellowed at the retreating teenagers, to them that suffer for him they never heard of, when they that trace their genealogy from the gods shall learn that they are the unhappy issue of sinful man. I gazed down at Ness, a new Eve, her body spread out beneath me. Go, Bellymoth, I screamed as I shot my load, and take this caitiff hence.
Reader number 2. Hey, I'm going to read because I can't memorize and wouldn't try to memorize or want to my own writing.
One of the things that gets me is people with my tastes, they're really not catered for. Have you tried going in the newsagents, right? You see the way the porn market's segmented these days, right? You want Asian babes, you got them. You want hot chocolate Afro-Caribbean babes, you got them. You want big and beautiful, you got them. You want blokes, yeah? You got them, right? But I'm in there scanning the shelf, right? No IQ, no PhD birds. Terrible. In America, if you go over there, right, they got a few mags that are a good laugh. You've seen Celebrity Sleuth. It's where they sort of have shots of people like Sharon Stone so you can see her knickers. Bit of a cheap thrill and you get to see more of her in the movies. Then there's Barely Legal, which is over the age of consent, but just 19 in most parts of the States. And of course my favourite, Slosh, because there's nothing like seeing a bird splattered in custard. But anyway, you probably think I'm a bit of a sad bastard going on about this stuff, but in actual fact, pulling really isn't a problem for me. Because the CIA and British intelligence are very interested in my conspiracy research. The way they investigate people, they plant girlfriends on them. You know, all I have to do is my phone's bugged, right? I'm getting bored, so I phone up a friend and go, listen, right, I'm really bored with shagging Swedish anthropologists, right? What I really need is a 6-foot-plus woman from the Amazon with a PhD in pure mathematics. No problem, go down the pub, I get chatted up by one. You're probably wondering, you know, exactly what the nature of my research is. And I can tell you, I've really blown the gaff on what's going on, right? Who do you think's the biggest secret society in the world? Any guesses? No? You got no idea? Did I hear the Freemasons? Did I hear the Catholic Church? Anyone want to make any suggestions? The Illuminati? No, they were closed down in bloody 1886 or something by the Bavarian government. It's a myth that they're still going. Anyway, they were good, the Illuminati. I'm all for Adam Weishaupt. No, I'll tell you, right? God, you're a very quiet audience. You can heckle. I do this thing, right? It's clear no one's seen me before, right? If you shout out boring, I make this joke and I pay you 10 quid, but you haven't won it, right? Because if you shout out boring, I go, Kierkegaard said boredom was a demonic side of pantheism and the English have a genius for it. We'll move on, right? I'll tell you what, the biggest secret society in the world is the CIA. Obvious, right? They're not the top Johns, however, at this occult business, right? Because if you look at the royal family, they've had 1,000 years of practice at it, right? And one of the things I find strange is the tabloid press, they rag Prince Charles about his belief in reincarnation, but when was the last time you saw him speculate on who Prince Charles believes he's the reincarnation of? Anyone got any ideas? Who does Charlie believe he's the reincarnation of? Clue, right? Major world leader who died just before he was born. We got any ideas? Buddha? Gandhi? No, I'll give you more of a clue, right? Interest in amateur painting, traditionalist views about architecture, interest in the occult. Brilliant, Hitler, right? That's who Charles believes he's the reincarnation of. Right, oh, you're loving this, aren't you? It's fucking great, eh? Oh no, we've done that one. You have to come up with something different than boring. Calm down, come on. Get rid of the mic. No, I like the mic. It's power, baby. Good, good. Can we have a bit more heckling, please? You could heckle while I'm reciting if you wanted as well. We got any Buddhists here? Any Buddhists? Oh, you're scum, right? People say, oh, you know, like I don't like religion, like I don't like Christians or whatever, but, you know, Buddhists are all right, but they're scum, right? What about the Tamils in Sri Lanka? Yeah, well, I'm the one getting paid. I'm quite happy about it. Come on, come on. Hey, shall I let you in a secret? If you, like, do a slow hand clap, it works better, but, you know, you have to work together to do that one. I hope you like jazz, by the way, because that's what you got next. Anyway, better than me. Get off, get your tits out if you want me to get them off. You'll be lucky. You'll have to pay more than 3 quid. God, this person's dedicated. Isn't anyone going to help them with a slow hand clap? Oh, this is getting better. I like this, yeah. Parliament Square was a riot of colour and action. Flames were leaping from Big Ben and Westminster Abbey. The trouble had spread down Millbank, and word had just reached those at the epicentre of the disturbance that the Tate Gallery had been fired. The news that billions of pounds worth of modern art was going up in smoke brought loud cheers from the crowd. As street-hardened proletarians, they understood the oppressive function of bourgeois culture. They were going to build a new world, without art or any of the other elitist garbage that characterised the reigning society. It goes without saying that quick-thinking militants had wreaked similar destruction on the National Gallery, the ICA, and the numerous palaces and foreign embassies located in the area liberated by the insurgents. Terry found Joyce at the very centre of Parliament Square. She was in his arms as Big Ben crumbled and went crashing into the Thames. The comrades laughed manically as this symbol of imperial oppression was wiped from the face of London. To achieve freedom, they had to erase, demolish and otherwise destroy the very architecture around which the bourgeoisie had engineered the domination of their class. The city would have to burn and burn and burn before this destructive frenzy reached an orgasmic resolution. Watching the Houses of Parliament reduced to a smouldering ruin made Terry and Joyce feel horny as hell. The almighty crash as the roof of Westminster Abbey caved in added urgency to their lust. A church has stood on the site since the 7th century. In the 11th century, Edward the Confessor founded the present building. Henry III began a vast programme of restructuring in 1245, and this marked the founding of the Abbey as it was known until its demolition at the hands of the feisty proletarian mob. Cloisters and monastic buildings were added in the 14th century, the nave and aisle being rebuilt at around the same time. Then, in the 16th century, Henry VII built the Eastern Chapel, which was named after him. With the exceptions of Edward V and Edward VIII, every monarch since William the Conqueror had been crowned within the dusty confines of this architectural abortion. Many members of the aristocracy had been laid to rest within the building, and it was good to know their bones were getting a roasting. The destruction of this ancient monument marked the end of Britain's Christian experiment and a return to the country's traditional pagan values of polymorphous perversity. And if the royal family wanted to stick with the religion it had foisted upon an unwilling underclass, the entire Windsor clan could go and fuck the Pope. The masses had no use for overpaid sponges whose gene pool had been poisoned from years of inbreeding. Hand in hand, Terry and Joyce ran through Victoria Tower Gardens. On reaching the edge of the Thames, they leant over the stone parapet and beneath them saw what they'd been hoping to find. Joyce jumped down into the rowing boat, then spread her arms to catch Terry as he clambered over the wall and lowered himself into her embrace. Terry's mouth met Joyce's lips and the girl from Seven thought heaven was in his kiss. She wondered whether the boot boy was going to suck the soul from her body. Gradually, she was lifting the veil of cynicism that had descended upon Blake, and the brand of hard loving he gave in return repaid her every effort to make him feel whole again. Joyce sincerely believed that before the two of them could settle down and raise a family, Terry had to resolve the frustrated desires of his youth. Personally, she'd never adhered to the anarchist ideology of overthrowing the state, but if that was what it took to make a man happy, then she was more than prepared to erase those parts of London which serviced the governmental machine. It was for this reason that she'd helped Jackie and Winston orchestrate the Westminster riot and sent Terry off to subvert fascist youth. The way the boot boy slid his hand under the waistband of her Levi's told Joyce she'd done a great deal to help discharge the tension, while the psychological conflicts of Terry's teenage years remained unresolved. As the skinhead fingered her love button, Joyce cast off, letting the tidal flow carry them eastwards. Terry had two fingers inside the hippie's cunt as the boat drifted into the centre of the mighty Thames. No, Joyce rasped as Terry slid down a bulk and began to lap at a hole. I want to suck you off. The hippie hauled Blake to his feet and then got down on her knees. As she eased the boot boy's cock from his flies and the love muscle began to harden in her palm, storm clouds gathered over London. Joyce took the head of Blake's huge tool in her mouth while simultaneously working the base with her hand. She knew that for Terry, speech acted as a kind of body armour, and therefore wasn't surprised when he began to recite, I bites a copse, fiery, flying roll. Thus saith the Lord, Blake howled, as though the words had welled up from his bowels. I inform you that I overturn, overturn, overturn. As Blake declaimed the anarchist classic, spots of rain began to fall on his cropped scalp. A chill wind took the warmth from the summer evening and churned the waters of the Thames. But Terry stood firm as the boat began to rock, and Joyce worked his prick with her tongue. Behold, I, the eternal God, the Lord of hosts, am coming to level to some purpose, to level with a witness, to level the hills with the valleys, and to lay the mountains low. There was a low rumble of thunder, and the storm began in earnest. The rain lashed against Blake as he screamed his message of defiance to the stars. The rowing-boat was tossed mercilessly on a swell which threatened to send its two occupants plunging into the deep waters which raged around them. Joyce piled on the pressure, and Terry gave himself up to terrible pleasures. For the day of the Lord of hosts shall be upon everyone who is proud and lofty, and upon everyone who is lifted up, and he shall be brought low. For a brief moment a flash of lightning illuminated the boot boy, who'd thrown back his head and raised his arms to the heavens. The cops on Westminster Bridge, who constituted the thin blue line protecting South London from the ravages of proletarian insurgents, grinned wickedly as they caught a glimpse of the girl working the skinhead's love muscle with her teeth and her tongue. In that day a man shall cast his idols of silver and idols of gold to the bats and to the moles, for the Lord is now risen to shake terribly the earth. The unusual atmospheric conditions sent Terry's voice thundering across London, and it was heard by thousands of people. Many a woman trembled in fear, thinking the final day of judgment had stolen unnoticed upon them. Remember your forerunner, who is putting down the mighty from their feet and exalting them of low degree. Joyce worked Terry's cock frantically with her hand. "I want you to come," she sobbed before putting the member back in her mouth. It was as if Blake's libido had hardened, and the words of fire and steel pouring from him had replaced liquid genetics as the issue sexual stimulation brought forth from his bulk. Ministers, fat parsons, vicars, lecturers and monarchs have been the chief instruments of all horrid abominations which cry for vengeance. Terry's back stiffened as Joyce swallowed his cock, and the roaring waters sent them hurtling under Blackfriars Bridge. The rain drummed against the two figures like machine gun bullets fired into a phalanx of troops. The very jaws of hell had opened up before them, and chaos spewed forth. Blake was soaked to the skin, and the wetness threatened to seep into the interior of his being. Only by concentrating all his energy on the words he was reciting could the skinhead find relief from the nausea that made his hands shake. He would not allow the liquid genetics that boiled inside his groin to be discharged from his throbbing love muscle. Such a deluge would obliterate the boundaries he'd so carefully erected around the muscular structure of his bulk. We should be drunk every day of the week and lie with whores in the marketplace and account these as better actions than taking the poor, abused, enslaved ploughman's money from him. The current raged around the tiny boat as it shot beneath Southwark Bridge like a bullet slicing through a stormtrooper's brain. Joyce continued to work the base of Terry's cock with her hand and its tip with her mouth. Blake's eyes radiated a brilliant blue as the liquid DNA boiled in his groin, but through sheer force of will, he prevented it exploding out into this world of illusion. Be no longer so horridly, hellishly, impudently, arrogantly wicked as to judge what is sin, what not, what evil and what not, what blasphemy and what not. For thou and all thy reverend divine so-called, who divine for tithes, hire and money, and serve the Lord Jesus Christ for their own bellies, are ignorant of this thing. How, rich men, for the miseries which are just now coming upon you. The rust of your silver is rising up in judgment against you, burning your flesh with fire. Joyce worked Terry's cock with an ever-growing frenzy as the boat sped through the turbulent water that coursed round London Bridge. Blake knew he couldn't hold on to his molten genetics for very much longer. His voice was hoarse, and he screamed cops tracked, as if his very life depended upon his ability to complete the recitation. The dreadful day of judgment is stealing on thee within these few hours. As Terry screamed the words, Joyce could feel his cum spurting into her mouth. An orgasm surged through their twin bulks as the boat was swept beneath Tower Bridge by the raging waters of the Thames. And because thou hast judged me, Terry hissed, I will judge thee with a witness. Expect it suddenly. The boot boy could feel the darkness welling up around him. He had no defence against the black cloud of unconsciousness. There were no longer any distinct boundaries to mark the limits of his being. Joyce caught Terry as he collapsed.
Pa does not like poets a bit. They give him bad dreams, he says. He has given orders to have them all caught and tamed, so that they can be published by Penguin or Faber and Faber, just like Craig Raine. And Papa will not allow any more poets to come into the country if he can help it. If any sneak in, he will shoot them like bears, anarchists, mountain lions and such wild animals. Papa says poets, rabbits and such vermin multiply indiscriminately. I practice every day with my new rifle so that I can shoot those wild beasts when I grow up.
to justify himself by claiming that he's other people think there's something romantic about being an anti-Satanist investigator. It's obvious he's a star of our Freemasons. Certainly, my work is dangerous. Why satanic conspiracy makers by the Illuminati temptation to indulge in systematic relations with them from hormonally challenged young ladies. Arguments would be overwhelming. Reception is nevertheless part of a massive work is worldwide conspiracy. I do all the things you expect any investigative journalist. Drag my name through the mud. I plow through the I ran out and I letters in the Bagla family, where I found centimeters and a pair of I've targeted ever since my mother in the pages of the Christian judge, and rather than admit to the family priest that she began investigating whether I said was not a case or Romero, although I have failed to be a sophisticated draw as I address from repackaging the easy-listening guys of the 60s by scientifically moving for a fact that Danny was I got on these notes and filed over the Jets office an album by the notorious black metal band Anarchism. I cried exploitation of that anti-Christ is far more than a temporary made-awful indiscretion. Secretary Roris day lent out of your worship's assorted flag grabbing and a share with my wife and nighties. I yelled at words that easily to last one death move to get up and guy and jelly floor stop the charts. My wife's grandmother and I stand nights and right say Lissette laugh, although the sign I really had something on the bastard using sophisticated sound to reveal to a star. I was able to isolate the faceless and necrophile. It tastes good. The wrenches originally carried the bit about Lissette sex and came to my attention after he began attacking Christians and family imitators such as Cliff Richard. The full extent of his headiness to call Cliff a great masterpiece. Summer holiday at criticized Cliff Richard. Even worse not to mention described the MNHRTA as I have lined my flat with the HARA word of the net was having his random rights Freemason's plan to assassinate England. I said as also attacked my window at each Ortiz and his secretary. I exposed the ways in which the Vatican and the Pope in Acre have been infiltrated by the get of the all-seeing eye. As a deranged unfortunately appears constant and red papers in the document summers scattered all over the back here of family value. Horrific bump. Lisette also after grabbing a national lottery and missing evidence on Sunday elected to the first place. I investigate starting the tale of the Iran bats. I leaped to this type of place and dedicated myself on his vortex like the plague. I could feel my hands shaking as I spread the papers across my lap. Universal truths of the Catholic doctrine, designed to make the ultimate sacrifice. Look ridiculous. Heavenly deception is brilliant and naive. As I read through this confession session with Father Harry, I began at every time to read that was the opera project. That's the great thing about internationally. You can sin as much as you like as mattress as long as you remember afterwards the story of Horobin Middle Age literature and this is my meaning on this for his mattress valuable and yet theoretically remain the very wonderful use his mattress for the popular masturbation. I have to confess, I was getting dizzy steamed up against my lady and his mattress my wife still left them being privy to all sorts of bizarre wash and drinking them all. I find day necessary in that or it often loses people and the humiliation of being Roger is well worth it if you get my literacy tidbit of accurate material the horizons. Shiny gravestones I stood up and the line towel and the body around my waist, bringing up the rear. I thrust my posterior in the face of a young grass for 10 sitting across from the barn stacked high with that good pure sympathetically bastard. Roll a uniform ungrateful you startled by all the flash presence 50-pound Larry and his manager and quickly changed my gold. Lisette has this juncture the following that I am at Larry's mattress and like the matter is I will build Larry right while we win the Canyon. The night followed me into the next segment, obviously desperate to make it with such a fine specimen of men white as myself, seen our knees clapping together, asking the forsaken wretch, with my head in the M-A-D-D-R-E-S-S from his pocket, occasional lighter blades and edges. I knew that I was able to sit down for a week to supper. It was well worth it if I got the information I desired. Everybody's M-A-D-D-R-E-S-S, a pass and alone, and like that was no asleep. Loaded with a dirt on kneecaps, mysterious as my forehead and front teeth smashed the together. You're an operatic. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. The boy shot mysterious as Gary. Tell me something anyway. And I didn't pay double. You can please having an affair with your wife's grandmother, and me, the kid loved two yellows. No good, and me, I'm not married to yellows. Irate, and me. Okay, two yellows. The shirt lifter hesitated for a minute. P-A-S-S-I-N-G C-I-L-I-N-D-R-A-B-A-E-H-A-T-C-H cocksucker, if you insist, I yelled as I shot my load to crowd. I am trying to complete. Meanwhile, failed to live in the family image. He attempts to reject marrow until envious by the very paltriness of his as I paid off the shit stabber as you'll I knew all the suffering and humiliation I had and been well worth the D-A-N. Now I really had to turn on R-I-P-S. I decided to be L-A-B-D-E at his office. He'd be sorry for all that been standing around my way and I still to be back and sort of section and practices amazed by Larry's dance. I'd Xerox 4 copies of a stinker of the review that doesn't production remix disorder yourself. Smash hits by L-F-I-R and a dead receipt from Pax. There really was no good disorder himself set when Pax said his release is named. What did I tell you? Authentic voice H-I-R-D Porter said and his cronies were bound to the quarter when I introduced the business complete review. F-O-H-I-T-A added the headline breaking excited T-U-R-A-B-L-I-S-S-C-T-T and to meet P-R-O-T-C-T-I-O-N-S. My smooth bit afraid and marvelous apple into the street to see you menting my receptionist M-I-S when I presented myself A-S-S-I-N-G-I-L-A-R-D-A-E-H-A-T-C-H about his sex and liquid boy identity asleep, etc. Luther is to be H-I-R-D standing back. The rich Solomon Burke. That was very I showed the H-A-R-A. I began descripting the slaves and production just received on a sure sign that a glance by the repairing may help in reacting from concealed disgust, but I took long bastard should have anything trying sophisticatedly mad. Unfortunately, Larry would take the leaflets I was offering out to win being ever productions were cringing cowards and shock as I relented the flow out their sorry self-intoxicating I faced the whole world down in my hand. So it doesn't conductor's path because he came to easily my fair boss. You've been talking with yourself ever to get away with this calling me such a complete genius. I am the Van Helsing who will drive a stake for Defiant figure black heart and covered another on, not even try. I screamed that the reception conductor was obviously irritating for the past 30 seconds attempting to undermine my sanity. Go on, conspiracy is past and ever growing during thanks to my immense brilliance as an investigative reporter. I cracked it loose. I'd expose for the cup, the spivs and the anti-fascist, the spies and your sadness, the redhead hiss. I'd make them regret from that they even while simultaneously pouring a right and Bellow zero head flex about them rate both by hadn't even started a rather peculiar phenomenon that raises many interesting philosophical questions their own medicine barked. Okay, it's arresting them because the police are at least not for handling that plagiarism that didn't matter are not quite they say even in our philosophy respect like I also got in that trouble recently for calling myself a as judge and jury, so they won't get off lightly. Watch out world because here I come.
Monty, Cantsin. Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty 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 Cantsin.
Monty
Monty Cantsin.
Monty.
Monty Cantsin.
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 Monty
Monty Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin.
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin. Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin. Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty Cantsin.
Monty
Monty
Cantsin. Monty Cantsin. Monty Cantsin. Monty Cantsin.
Cantsin.
Monty
Cantsin.
Cantsin. Monty Cantsin. Monty Cantsin. Monty.
I wanted to kind of ask, with the interest in kind of frequency weapons, were you interested in all the kind of, you know, the Verney stuff, this retirement couple who claim they've been, one of them's died now, they claim that their retirement home was bombarded with sonic MOD weapons in the last few years?
Wait, is this microwave?
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
No, I know some people who used to hang around at Green and Common, and they all reckon that they were zapped on a regular basis. But I mean, no, I was calling him Pasty. No, I was calling him Pasty. Which, you know, hello, Pasty.
I hear my name's Pasty.
I thought that was. I didn't know you'd coined it.
Hey, this is Stewart Home.
Hi.
Hi.
My wife.
Hi.
Gimpo?
Hi. Hi.
Gimpo.
Right, yeah, no, I've been reading all about you
Money
in...
burning assistant.
Yeah, reading about you in the Workshop for Nonlinear Architecture newsletter and in Bill and Mark's novel.
Yeah, that one.
You,
Yeah, there's some great descriptions you can put in.
Yeah,
It's quite
yeah.
a nice place,
Really?
I wouldn't have walked behind.
Yeah, so you was saying you knew a bit about the
Well, no, we
microwave.
don't really know anything at the moment about any research that's been done into sonic weapons.
Right.
You know, it's sort of blank, the whole thing. It's the sonic weapons thing.
We don't even
We're just making the whole thing up.
Right, so you don't know anything about the kind of conspiracy research stuff that's in magazines like Lobster?
No.
I mean, because your weapons are, according to the press release, are like older 60s type stuff rather than this microwave.
No, I made all that up.
You just made it up?
Yeah.
So
It's just a van, a disco van.
Man, right,
With some
right,
speakers in it.
right,
You know,
brilliant.
No more than that. And this media hysteria is blown up.
Yeah,
It's quite good. I mean, I'm quite into it.
yeah,
That we're coward killing and sonic weapon wielding, you know, evil people. Which is great. I don't mind that.
yeah. So that was,
It was just an accident.
Yeah.
Didn't know that we did it.
yeah, because I saw you do the thing on the South Bank and it just looked like a load of, I mean,
Without that,
yeah, like
It's just a load of racket.
yeah,
The van.
serious racket. I mean, it didn't
Yeah.
strike me as being,
It's not dangerous or
No.
you know, threatening in any
Thanks
way
to
at
the
all.
electricity.
It's not even that loud, you know.
yeah, well, that's what I thought,
Well, I
actually.
mean, it's true that certain crowds, you know, are disturbed by noise, but you know, it's jumping on the bandwagon.
Right, right, so there's no kind of interest in the series.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
am
you are
interested in it,
interested, yeah.
And we have got some pretty amazing equipment
Yeah,
that potentially could do some quite interesting things.
right,
But it's really early days yet, you know.
right, so you're just experimenting and it was...
Yeah, we're